He lost his wife, his son lost his voice, and inside a house filled with silence, hope seemed like a forgotten word, until a quiet girl with a sketchbook stepped through the door, and without speaking, began to unlock a world that no one else could reach. But what happens when a single whispered word changes everything? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where you are watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The Harrow house stood on a hill where fog seemed to gather, like it was trying to keep secrets. Its windows large but never open, its rooms clean but never warm, and in its quietest corner lived a boy named Nolan, 8 years old, hair like burnt caramel, eyes full of stillness. He hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not since the day his mother didn't wake up. His father, Mr. Elliot Harrow, once a man of blueprints and sunlight, now moved like a figure carved from stone. He still wore suits, still checked his watch, but his voice had lost its color. He didn't yell, he didn't cry. He simply stopped opening the doors that mattered when people came to clean or deliver things. They were told to be quick, not to disturb the boy, and certainly not to knock on the study door. Because inside that room, Elliot buried himself in work, the kind of work that didn't ask him how he was feeling. Spreadsheets, real estate reports, international numbers that filled the silence better than small talk ever could. Nolan didn't go to school anymore, not since he stopped answering questions. Instead, he wandered the house like a breeze no one noticed. He didn't run, he didn't play, he simply moved, sometimes tracing the edge of the walls with his fingers, as if trying to remember what touch used to feel like. On a Monday, a woman named Marcella arrived, the newest housekeeper sent by the agency. She was quiet, kind, kept to herself, and more importantly, she didn't sing while sweeping. Elliot appreciated that. What Elliot didn't know, what no one had asked, was that Marcella had a daughter, 15, named Lena. Lena, who barely spoke but carried a sketchbook wherever she went. Marcella brought her along that week because school had closed early and there was no one else to watch her. Stay in the kitchen, Marcella told her, and don't go wandering. Lena nodded. But curiosity doesn't always follow rules, and the house was big, like a museum built by someone who loved silence more than laughter. Lena didn't touch anything. She just walked, slow and light, her eyes scanning corners and bookshelves and dust that danced in sunlight. Then she saw a door slightly open, just enough to whisper, "Come in." So she stepped inside. It was the library, the kind with shelves that climbed the walls and old chairs that looked like they remembered stories. And there, behind one of them, sat a boy, still as a shadow, holding a blue pencil like it was something sacred. He didn't look up, but he didn't run either. Lena didn't speak. She just sat, cross-legged on the floor a few feet away. She opened her backpack, pulled out her sketchbook, and began to draw, not loudly, not dramatically, just simple line shapes of trees, a fox curled under one, tiny stars blinking above. Nolan didn't move at first, but Lena noticed the way he tilted slightly toward her, like a flower turning slowly toward warmth. So she kept drawing, a rabbit behind some bushes, a moon high above, colors blooming from her pencil: orange, soft green, gold. Nolan inched closer, silent but watching, his eyes tracing every color she touched. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled tissue. Inside were 2 broken crayons, one yellow, one red. He placed them beside her sketchbook, not looking at her, not asking for anything, just offering. Lena didn't act surprised. She simply smiled, small and slow, a smile that said, "I see you." She picked up the red crayon and drew a heart on the fox's chest, then slid the crayon back to him, gently. Nolan stared at it, then picked up the yellow one and drew a circle in the corner, a sun uneven and wobbly, but shining. When Marcella came to find her daughter, she gasped, thinking something was wrong. But all she found was her daughter sitting with a boy the house never spoke of. A boy flipping through her drawings, eyes wide and fingers tracing soft pencil lines, from his office. Elliot had seen everything on the security feed. At first, He hovered over the intercom button, his instinct ready to break the moment. But he didn't press it, he just watched. Watched the way Nolan leaned closer. Watched how Lena didn't reach out, didn't demand. Just let the moment grow on its own. That night, Elliot replayed the footage, again and again, trying to find a reason, a flaw, a logical explanation. But all he saw was his son inching towards something, and a girl who knew how to wait. For the first time in many months, Elliot didn't fall asleep with a spreadsheet open. Instead, he sat at his desk, staring at nothing, wondering what might happen if he stopped trying to fix things, and just started paying attention. The next day, Lena came back, not because anyone asked her to, but because she felt like something had started. Something small and quiet, but real, and she wanted to see where it might lead. She brought her sketchbook again, along with a few extra crayons wrapped in a soft cloth. They were short and used, some without labels, but they still made color, and that's all that mattered. Marcella didn't ask questions. She just handed her daughter a sandwich, smoothed her hair once, and said, "Be careful." Lena nodded and walked down the same hallway, her steps soft, her bag slung over one shoulder. In the library, Nolan was already there, sitting in the exact same spot, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes watching the light move across the rug. When Lena entered, he didn't look away, he just blinked once, like he was acknowledging her. She didn't speak. She just sat down, opened her sketchbook, and laid the crayons gently between them. Then, with the same calm she always carried, she began to draw again. Today, it was a turtle, slow and careful, moving through leaves. She added small flowers near its shell, soft pink and blue. Nolan watched every line, his head tilted slightly like he was listening with his eyes. He didn't speak, but he reached for one of the crayons, yellow, and drew a circle again, this time above the turtle. A sun, slightly larger, still uneven, but brighter. Lena looked at it, nodded once, and kept drawing, not praising, not correcting, just continuing. The story they were building together. Every day that week, she returned, always entering the library the same way, always sitting the same distance from him. Sometimes they drew animals. Other times shapes or trees or made-up creatures with wings and 6 legs. And always, color was at the center of everything. Nolan never said a word, but he began to bring things, little offerings, a smooth stone, a piece of ribbon, once a tiny puzzle piece, each one placed gently beside her notebook before they began. Elliot noticed. He told himself he was just checking the cameras to make sure nothing strange was happening. But deep down, he knew something was shifting. His son, the boy who hadn't smiled in a year, was choosing to be near someone. And that someone was not a therapist, not a teacher, not a doctor. Just a girl with a quiet way about her and a backpack full of crayons. Elliot didn't interfere, but he started turning off the sound on his calls when he knew Lena was there. He started watching longer than he meant to, even when the meetings piled up on his calendar. Something about the way Nolan leaned in, the way he reached for certain colors, it felt like the beginning of something that couldn't be measured in reports. On Thursday, Lena brought a small card with words in different colors, 1 word per card. She held up the first blue, then pointed to the blue crayon. Nolan blinked. His eyes moved from the card to the pencil, then to the drawing they'd made yesterday. He reached over, picked up the crayon, and touched it gently to a part of the drawing in old trees' leaves. Then he put the crayon down and looked at her. He didn't need to speak, she understood, so she moved to the next card, green, then yellow. Each time he responded not with words but with movement, a touch, a glance, a soft shift forward. On Friday, she brought a memory game made from paper, small squares with fruit and colors in French. When she held up pomme, he blinked. Twice when she whispered vert, he leaned closer. That's when she realized something. He wasn't just watching the pictures, he was listening, really listening. To the sounds, to the rhythm, to the feeling behind the word. Some languages made him pause longer. Mandarin, especially when she said lan se for blue. He tapped the blue crayon softly, as if the word had a sound he recognized deep inside. She didn't ask why. She didn't try to explain it. She just nodded and kept going, every moment. With Nolan became a new kind of language, not spoken, but shared. They didn't talk, they built, line by line, color by color. A small world, only they understood. Elliot sat in his office that evening, watching the day's footage again, no sound. Just the two of them on the carpet surrounded by drawings and crayons. He watched Nolan reach for a flashcard, trace the edge with his finger, then look up at Lena, only for a second, but with something behind his eyes. Recognition, connection, a question maybe, or a thank you that didn't need words. Elliot leaned back in his chair and sighed. He didn't understand how this was happening. Didn't understand the rules. But for once, he didn't feel the urge to fix it. He just wanted to let it keep going. In the library, under a lamp that hummed softly in the corner, two children sat, surrounded by stars drawn in crayon, foxes curled under trees, and suns that kept growing bigger each day. They didn't speak, but the silence between them was not empty. It was full of color, of trust, of something just beginning to bloom. The next Monday, Lena arrived with something new in her backpack. It wasn't a game or a sketchbook. It was a small paper pouch, folded at the top, carefully labeled in her handwriting word seeds. She didn't explain right away, she just waved at her mother, walked through the big front door, and made her way toward the library. Like always, Nolan was already waiting, sitting cross-legged with a line of crayons arranged neatly in front of him, yellow, green, red, blue. He looked up when she entered, only for a moment, but that look had grown softer lately. Not welcoming exactly, but not afraid either. Lena sat down and pulled out the pouch, then a tiny piece of paper folded in half. She showed it to Nolan, one word written on it in black ink. Safe. We're going to plant this today, she said gently. Nolan didn't react, but he didn't pull away either. That was enough. She led him to the garden outside, a small patch of earth behind the west wing, overgrown and a little wild, but with space to grow something new. They knelt in the dirt. Lena handed him a small wooden stick and the paper word. You can dig the hole, she whispered. Nolan took the stick and made a small space in the soil. Then, carefully, Lena folded the paper smaller and tucked it in. Words are like seeds, she said. They don't always grow right away, but if we take care of them, they might. Nolan didn't speak, but he pressed the dirt over the word with his hand, then looked at the spot for a long time, not moving, not blinking, just watching. That day, they didn't draw. They just sat near the planted word, sometimes looking at the sky, sometimes at the ground, but mostly at nothing at all. And it was enough. The next afternoon, they planted another listen, then hope. Each time, Nolan helped without needing words, and each time, he looked a little longer at the soil afterward. Elliot, watching from his window, couldn't make sense of it. His son and this girl planting pieces of paper in the dirt, but something about it didn't feel silly. It felt meaningful, like something too quiet to name. He didn't ask questions, not yet, but he called someone. A specialist, Dr. Green, a child behavior expert with charts and tests and a calm, polished voice. The appointment was made in secret. Elliot didn't tell Lena, he just watched and waited. When Dr. Green arrived 2 days later, she came with 2 tablets, a clipboard, and her assistant. Her words were sweet but sharp, her smile smooth but distant. Lena was in the library, as usual. Nolan was placing crayons in a circle around a sketch she'd drawn of a lion sleeping beneath a sky full of stars. Dr. Green entered quietly but quickly. Hello, Nolan, she said cheerfully. I'm here to learn about you. Nolan froze, his hands stopped moving. His face emptied of expression. The doctor moved closer, showed him flashcards, asked questions, clapped her hands gently to draw his attention. Nolan didn't blink, didn't move, just closed his eyes. Lena stood beside him, watching everything, not saying a word, but holding her notebook like it was a shield. Elliot stood near the doorway, arms crossed, his eyes flicking between the boy and the doctor. Is he regressing? He whispered to Lena. No, she replied without looking at him. He's protecting himself. Doctor, Green tried again, louder this time. Nolan point to the happy face. Nothing. She turned to Elliot. Some children plateau, she said kindly. It's time to reassess our expectations. Elliot nodded, half understanding, half hurting, but Lena just clenched her jaw. She didn't argue, she just waited. After the doctor left, Nolan crawled into the corner near the bookshelf, his back to the room, his hands gripping his blue crayon. Like it might disappear. Lena knelt beside him, said nothing, then slowly handed him his sketchbook. Nolan opened to a new page and began to draw. His strokes were rough, fast, not like before. He drew a face. Round, sharp eyes, a mouth wide open. Red lines slashed through it, 4 heavy marks. He dropped the crayon, turned away again. Elliot stepped forward, his voice soft. Is that me? He asked. Lena shook her head. No, she said. That's her. The doctor? Yes. But, the red lines? She's loud, Lena said quietly, but she doesn't listen. Elliot stared at the drawing, the red marks, the broken look in his son's eyes, and something inside him cracked, not from pain, but from recognition. He had hired the best. He had planned everything, but he had never once asked what Nolan wanted. He had never really listened. He thought he was helping, but maybe he was just the noise. That night, he didn't go back to work, he didn't open his laptop, he didn't pour his usual glass of wine. He sat in the garden, beside the word hope, and let the silence speak. The morning was quiet, but something about the air felt different, lighter, almost like the house itself was holding its breath. Lena arrived with her backpack and a soft smile inside. She carried new sketch pages, a pack of flashcards, and a tiny folded note she hadn't shown anyone. Nolan was already in the library, sitting near the window, his eyes watching the sunlight dance on the floor. He had begun waiting for her. Not with words, but with presence. His sketchbook open beside him, his favorite crayon resting on top. Lena sat beside him without a word, just like every other day, but today, she gently placed the folded note between them. It was a card, with one word written in bold letters: belong. Nolan didn't touch it at first. He only stared, his fingers twitching lightly near his lap. Lena didn't push. She just opened her sketchbook and began to draw slow and careful lines of a tree, a house, and 3 small figures underneath. A man, a girl with a braid, and a boy holding both their hands. Nolan's eyes followed every stroke. Then he reached for his own pencil and added something small. A circle in the sky. A sun brighter than usual. Elliot was watching from the hallway, not through the camera this time, but in person, close enough to see, far enough to let the moment unfold. He didn't speak. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. Later that day, Lena brought Nolan outside to the garden. They had a new word to plant. This one was special. Nolan held the paper himself. Freedom, written in his own messy handwriting, not perfect, but his. They dug a small hole together, careful and slow, then placed the paper inside, covered it gently, and waited. For a while nothing happened, just wind, just sun, just silence. But then Nolan leaned forward, his lips parted, and in a voice almost too soft to hear, he whispered, freedom. Lena froze, her heart skipped, her eyes wide. He had spoken. Not from pressure, not for reward, but because the word had grown inside him and wanted to be heard. Elliot was at the window, coffee in his hand, watching as his son said his first word. In almost 2 years, he dropped the cup. It didn't break, but he nearly did. He sat down, hands shaking, eyes full of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That night, the house was still, but it wasn't lonely. Elliot walked slowly to Nolan's room, the door slightly open, just like his wife used to leave it. He stepped inside, saw Nolan lying under the blanket, awake, staring at the ceiling. Good night, Nolan, Elliot said softly, almost afraid the words would float away. Nolan turned his head. looked at him, then whispered, "Night, Papa." Elliot collapsed outside the door, not from grief, but from the weight of love he had buried for so long. The next day, Elliot sat with Marcella in the kitchen. He slid an envelope across the table. "For Lena," he said. "Please make sure she reads it." Marcella looked at it, then at him, and nodded without speaking. Inside the envelope was a simple letter, and a form, a request for guardianship. Elliot wasn't trying to reward her. He wasn't doing it out of gratitude alone. He was doing it because she belonged, not just in the house, but in their lives. Lena read the letter alone in her room, tears quietly falling on the page, not from sadness, but from being seen. She packed her bag again that evening, but this time she didn't just carry crayons and sketchbooks. She carried a future. The following week, Nolan drew a picture and handed it to Elliot. It was the three of them, a man, a girl with a braid, a boy, all holding hands in front of a garden. On the bottom, Nolan had written one word in blocky letters, "family." Elliot didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just pulled Nolan close, held him for a long time, and closed his eyes. Lena stood nearby, watching the moment, feeling it like the warmth of morning sun, and smiled. There was no applause, no big celebration, just three people in a quiet house, finally finding what they had lost. Not noise, not answers, but connection. And in the silence that followed, a single truth bloomed. Some words don't need to be spoken to grow, but when they are, they change everything.